Hello and welcome to our final session of the day. So last but by no means least, we're going to be joined by Jill Wildman, the Swipton Business Development Advisor, who will be talking to Madeleine Gannon of Atonaton and Silas Adekunle, co-founder and former CEO of Reach Robotics. So over to you guys.
Thanks, Rosanna. Hi, and welcome to this last session. And I cannot tell you how excited I am to bring Silas Adekunle and Madeleine Gannon to finish up this event. Hi, both. This is the first double keynote I've seen, and I'm really excited to see what happens when you bring people together to speak. And this afternoon, we're going to be talking about robots, from battling game robots through to pack behaviours that robots might demonstrate. Let me tell you a little bit about the two people that you're going to see, and then we can see some of their work, and then it will take questions from you. So please add your questions to the chat as and when you're ready, and we'll take them then. First of all, Silas is Nigerian-born and locally trained at UE, and he was a UE robotics student and is now an international entrepreneur. That's a bit of a trajectory, really. Even I can't say it. But in 2017, he launched an augmented reality platform, Mechamon, which was about bringing robots and video game characters to life. We talk about a brave proposition. And yet he got investors to put $10 million into the idea, into Reach Robotics, the first gaming robots platform, and made deals with London venture partners, Apple and Amazon. So no small feat there. And then let me tell you about Madeleine. Madeleine and her studio, Atonaton, works to invent better ways for us to cohabit with the machines. And she's an architect. And robotics really found her. And often she's been called a robot tamer. Her Mimas project, which was at the Design Museum's the new Design Museum's opening event, brought lots of people to come and see what a robot might do in reaction to you. And her more recent Manners project looks specifically at pack behaviours of robots. So both of our speakers are going to tell you about their work, and a lot more than I can. But can I welcome Madeleine and Silas? And Madeleine, if you don't mind kicking off with your film, please.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me, by the way. I'm really, really excited to share my work with you all, and also just to have a general discussion, Silas, with you and with the audience, and of course with you, Jill. So let me switch over to share what I got for you. Okay, hit here, share. Okay, Jill, are you seeing my screen?
Totally.
Wonderful, great. So when you think of robots, I mean, a lot of us really think about these industrial automation robotic arms. And if you look at this, you know, these robots, they're in a constrained environment. We tell them what to do and they go ahead and do it. And for the past 50 years, for the past half century, that has really been the model that's worked for automation, industrial automation. But if we take a snapshot of what's happening today, what we can see is that actually there's an entire ecology of these intelligent autonomous machines that are leaving the lab to come live in the wild with us. So we still have industrial robots, but we also have, you know, robots roaming our sidewalks and our skies. They're delivering medicine and supplies in hospitals. They're our own robotic toys, which we'll hear more from Silas. You know, these things are living among us. And so a lot of my work focuses on reframing what we think of with these machines, with these industrial robots, and how we can take these things that we're used to commanding and controlling into a world where they're more a part of our everyday life and kind of outside of our control. So a lot of the work that I do takes this existing hardware, combines it with clever software to reimagine our relationship to these machines. It's about bringing new tools and new technologies to enhance these robot brains and give them eyes to see and respond to the world and the people around them. So I've been fortunate enough to kind of travel the world and bring these machines out of their normal territory. Like this Nemes in the Design Museum, for example, she usually lives in a assembly line in Birmingham in the UK. And the curators were kind enough to let her come take a holiday inside the Design Museum and hang out with people for about 6 months in 2016, 2017. And so it was a great opportunity to take this kind of really complex technology that's impacting our everyday life, take it out of an industrial setting and bring it into a cultural and a social setting, a societal setting, that we can all start thinking about what these machines can do. Most of my work involves convincing these machines to do things that they were never designed to do, which takes a lot with developing our own software, customizing some hardware to get these things that were designed to do short, repetitive tasks every day of their life, really, really boring lives, and to get them to instead understand what's happening around them and respond and react like any other living creature might do. And when you do that, you start to get these really playful interactions that now you have someone who, this might be their first encounter with robotics, and it's one that is playful, it's one that is exciting, it's one that speaks towards a more collaborative future with these machines. I've also been fortunate in working with the World Economic Forum as a culture leader over the years in bringing these experiences in front of policymakers. So not just museum settings, but also to the folks in charge of governance with how these technologies impact our life. And it's been a really hopeful experience for me to see people who, you know, are running countries, are running companies, begin to see these machines in a new light. That they're not here just for automation, not here just for optimization, but there's a potential for a whole new relationship with these machines that can shift from control and more towards connection. And that's kind of the future that I like to see and create when I'm working with these machines.
Fabulous. Thanks, Madeleine. That's a great introduction to what you do. I remember seeing the exhibition myself back in those few summers ago. It was pretty powerful. Silas, we'd love to see, I'd love you to share your work, please.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me here as well today, and it's a pleasure to be here. Quickly, in terms of my background, so studied robotics at UWE, a big university in the Southwest. Did a lot of work at the Bristol Robotics Lab, and I particularly loved take a lot of inspiration from nature, from biology. So for me, it had always been a case of how do you get inspiration from nature and then use that to create something that can amaze and inspire people. So at the last business, Reach Robotics, over the space of about 6 years, we created a product, a platform called Mechamon for entertainment and for education. So these were robots that could battle each other. I'll show a video quickly for those that might not be familiar with it. And they moved in the most amazing way, and they allowed people to create animations and create things that you wouldn't really think a robot would be able to do. We did close that business late last year, 2019, just because of the challenges in the consumer robotics space, inventory management, huge marketing budgets. And following that, I'm now working at a new startup that I co-founded with my previous co-founder and CTO, particularly in the industrial automation space. So I'll show a quick video of kind of Mechamon for those that haven't seen it, and then I'll expand a tiny bit on kind of what I'm doing now, which crosses over a bit with the type of robots that Madeleine works with as well. So let's share video. Hopefully you can see that. Let's play. In my soul, come on.
electric, ooh, break the mold, kinetic, my soul, magnetic, ooh, take control, connected, click, let's play, come play, let's play. Let's play. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So hopefully you got to see some of the interaction and the kind of advanced motion that was in that robot. So Mechamon is now as part of my passion for education and developing the robotics ecosystem across Africa as well. So Mechamon, I'm now using that for education in Nigeria with kids that wanna learn about robotics as well. But coming out of that business, one of the lessons that we learned was around remote management of hardware and robots, and we had to build a lot of infrastructure to manage them remotely. And robotics technology and industrial automation technology is being adopted right now at an unprecedented rate. And just adopting to the technology and using it, say, in a factory is one part of the equation. The second part of it is you have to collect data from these devices, and you can have lots of different types of them to be able to make them more efficient, better, and things like that. So what we're building is a platform that allows quick and secure kind of remote management of industrial automation devices and robots without the need for additional experts. So you don't have to hire a whole kind of data science team. So I got to see both the kind of consumer robot world and kind of the fun side of creating the robots, and then the more serious kind of industrial side and deployment of robots as well with my new business.
Fantastic. I mean, that's a real breadth of exploration too. So I'm gonna ask anyone if you're ready, please start to put any questions you've got for Madeline and Silas in the chat so that we can see them. But because I'm here, I get to ask the first one or two maybe. And I'd like to start with inspirations. Silas, if you could answer first, what inspired you with robots? How did you get started as this is an idea?
So I think I touched on it a bit at the start, actually. In another life, I think I'd be a zoologist or biologist. So as much as I love robotics, I'm also a huge advocate for nature and wildlife. So from a very young age, I'm the type of kid that loves the farm environment. So kind of playing with wildlife, digging for spiders, just observing nature and appreciating the beauty of nature, but then also loving engineering. And for me, being able to combine the two, I really didn't know if I should become a mechanical engineer or to become kind of a biologist. And really, robotics was right down the middle. And that's where the inspiration came from. And then, I went to university, started studying robotics, and at the time it was actually a lot of industrial robots, pick and place. And I just thought, I started from a more artistic kind of direction. So I remember the first robot I built, which was an hexapod, at university, which was a robot that had 6 legs and it moved in this unique way. And I just thought, wow, so you can get something that's close to nature out of robotics, and kind of was hooked from there, really.
It says a lot about trusting in the things that you really are inspired by, rather than getting deviated into something that you think you should do. But actually, it's that combination that really is.
I believe so, yeah. That's always been a guiding kind of principle for me.
Totally. Madeline, you robotics discovered you really, rather than you going for robotics.
Yeah.
Or have I got that wrong?
No, I think so. I think and it's also the same sort of line of thought. I just sort of followed my curiosity towards it, and kind of like ran into robotics. So I come from more of the arts side of things. I'm trained as an architect, which is an amazing education that helps you dream up of worlds that don't exist. Plus, it gives you the tools to actually make them real with 3D modeling and the whole construction pipeline for, imagining whole cities and convincing someone to invest in you to make those cities real. What happened with me is as I was finishing up my last year of my master's, my university got this machine that could carve away material based on your own 3D model. And I never really made anything prior to that, besides things out of like paper and cardboard in architecture school. And the ability to take like all of my creativity, all of my imagination, and feed that to a CNC machine that can make a analog material, tactile version of it that you can touch almost instantly, that was really intoxicating. And I found myself wanting to do more and more creative things with this tool that fundamentally was not designed for people like me. It was designed for cabinet makers. And I kept hitting against the limits of what the software that talked to that machine could do because I wasn't making cabinets. And it kind of convinced me to follow my curiosity of wanting to do more of this and continue my education to Carnegie Mellon University, where I learned how to program, and they happen to have, buried in some third sub-basement, not just a CNC machine and a laser cutter and 3D printers, but also this big, giant industrial robot that no one was using and no one kind of knew how to use. And going down that rabbit hole, a very productive rabbit hole, really opened up a whole new world more on the technical side of things, that now I could come and bridge both the creative and the technical with these two like masterful skill sets together.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's more on trusting what the things that inspire you. Okay, I'm going to ask one more question before I plow into everyone else's questions, because I can. TV and film, favorite robot, Silas?
I'm a sucker for science fiction, and I remember kind of the first time Transformers came out. So I'm going to say Bumblebee, but Transformers in general. To me, it was kind of the ultimate expression of robots doing robot stuff. You've just got them. We're still far from that technology kind of capability, but you could have just the ultimate expression of robots doing really, really cool stuff. It always wows me, even though it's all CGI. Yeah.
Totally. Fantastic. And Madeline, what about you?
It's a really tough question. It's really tough because there's so many. But I'm going to go with Bender from Futurama, who is he's a bit of a scallywag robot friend that's always fun to be around.
Brilliant. I know I'm going to think of loads later, but it's interesting. We've got a question from Paul Cheney, who happens to mention another famous robot. Paul's asking, what about bringing those two things together, nature and robots? I'm thinking of the little drone robot in Silent Running film who looks after the garden on the spaceship. They were fantastic characters, but also played such a big role. What are your thoughts, Bose?
Well, I look at Silas's work and he's literally building a robotic crab. That's what this hexapod is, and it really lends to the biomimicry of what nature's happening with its individual kinematics. A lot of what I do is take something that doesn't look particularly natural and build more animalistic relationships between the people around it and the mechanical creature itself. So it's not the hardware, but actually the interaction design between them that thinks of different sort of pulls from different relationships that we have in nature, symbiotic, mutualistic, maybe even one-sided relationships that we have among our own friend groups, right? And tries to emulate and create ways for these machines to be more relatable and more relevant to the people around them.
Yeah, a point to add on that as well from my side. Biomimetics is a field of kind of robotics that I actually love the most. From kind of the previous work that was shown with Mechamon, but I actually also think it's inevitable in terms of where the direction needs to go. Madeline talked about the interaction elements, which is, if you want to, the world is designed for human, the world is designed for nature in a way. And we've taken a lot of inspiration from nature, but if you don't want to, you need robots to be made out of soft materials, more natural materials, so that they can be in the same space as human beings. Otherwise, you're always going to have that barrier in terms of just being able to interact. So a lot of the things I think about when it comes to the future of robotics, and certainly the fields I want to work in, and I spend a lot of time reading on this and staring research in that direction, is how do you down to the hardware itself, well, eventually it won't be hardware anymore, but, a soft organic material, is how do you create robots out of organic material so they can fit into our world better and therefore be able to have more impact on our world.
And I think it also relates to a systems level of control, like Silas, with what you're doing now with fleet management, right? We have an entire ecology of robots they're built from individual companies and sort of put out in the world. But as they become more prevalent part of our everyday life, they're interacting with people in much the same way that an animal that if we're going for a walk, we might see, they have their own agenda, they're doing their own thing, and we're not a part of their world. And I think leaning to nature as a way of showing how to communicate with that different alien species is a great way to build sort of independence and autonomy from people controlling, but you can also see it on a robot to robot level. So for example, a drone, every robot has a limitation to their own body, right? A drone can only fly for so long, but a drone could hitch a ride on a self-driving car and exchange, you get aerial view of your local map and I get out a ride to a distant location. Now all of a sudden that mutualistic behavior lets that drone go way, way, way further, lets that car see way, way, way more. And we see those sort of relationships in nature all the time to help certain animals go beyond the limitations of their own bodies.
Fantastic. We've got another question that reminds me of a robot that I saw in development in the US that was designed to bring drinks to kids who were in hospitals at night. And it had the biggest, fattest fingers and a spinning head that would have given me nightmares as a kid. And of course, that's not the end product at all. But it was interesting that there was this notion of maybe I will put a face on it and that will be okay. Adam Stringer is asking here about what are your perspectives on robots delivering healthcare? That's what made me think of the story.
I mean, it depends on what aspect of healthcare, right? We've got, robots helping for kind of say remote surgery or allowing say expertise from one area, especially as we start to get say 5G and you reduce latency and you can send huge amounts of data. I think earlier this year or late last year, the first type of a very complicated surgery was done remotely because there was only one doctor that could do it. And so even though it was a teleoperated robotic system, the robotic part of it, the artificial intelligence system, made sure that you didn't have jitter and things like that. And so, robotics can help kind of maximize the impact of healthcare. There's also another part of it that comes to say when it comes to say mental health. As people get older, you need care and assisted living and things like that. I think it's such a broad field in terms of areas where robots could fit in. The human-to-human interaction, I don't think robots will replace. I think, in fact, as we move forward in time, there are going to be the more mechanical work, the more precise work, the more heavy lifting where robots can help out. And then from the human interaction point of view, I think those fields are actually going to get more and more valuable. It's quite a huge field, so taking a broad kind of approach at it.
Yeah, I generally agree. And there are like robots in hospitals that carry things so that nurses don't have to, or they'll do autonomous delivery so that people don't have to actually go there. And there's a way of doing that to streamline. There's also a big push in robotics as an industry to have robotic caretaking. And that's what I seem kind of problematic, and it sort of builds off of Silas's point that a lot of the calls for automation in caretaking is to sort of because there's not enough people that will do the labor of taking care of someone who's old or taking care of someone who's infirm. And I sort of see that not as a technology or robotics issue, but a social issue. That these are also jobs that are primarily filled by women and immigrants. And if there was better pay and more appreciation for that caretaking labor, that you might have more people going to that job market rather than looking for robotics to come in. So there are some times, where you have a technology, but you don't quite have the problem. And I feel like robotic caretaking is something, and there's other solutions that can help with that.
Great stuff. It's a question that came up in a previous time, but I'd love you to explore a little bit about the human in your work and your work in the human. It would be really, really lovely to hear from both of you.
Madeline, do you want to go first? Because I think yours has more kind of examples.
Humanity. So a lot of what, so when people see my installations where a robot is understanding their body language and responding back with their own body language, what happens is that there's a level of perceived intelligence, a level of perceived connection, and that is a bit synthetic. And maybe synthetic is not the right word, but one-sided. It's a one-sided relationship. That robot in itself is acting as a vessel sometimes for human emotion, and it is what you need it to be, because it doesn't try to emulate a person. It just sort of speaks to us at this lower level frequency that kind of can talk to our kind of primitive, brains that are looking for body language as a way of connection. So I try to show that, we don't necessarily, that people themselves can fill in a lot of the gaps in technology, that we don't have to have faces with screens on robots, to Jill's point earlier, and that, we sort of see robot faces in just the screw holes that are on the faceplate of our machine. Like, we can't help but project our humanity onto these machines when they move in just the right way.
And I guess from my side, when going way back when we were going through the product design, so rather than the humanity in the robot itself, but more the human interaction, because when you're building a product, you have to keep that in mind and think through it. So we're building this robot that's relatively pricey, and you don't want it to be dropped around. You want people to interact with this thing almost as if it's a pet. So we explored lots of different faces, angles that were more natural, angles that were more synthetic, and but ultimately, and this is something I looked at the general kind of the consumer robotics industry as well. You have some oversimplification, but you have two kinds of ways you could do it: through motion or through the face. So robots with, say, big eyes that are quite inviting are very good for if you want up close interaction, and you see that with, say, a robot like Cosmo. Whereas with Mechamon, which you would play with from kind of a distance, you still want it to feel like a Pokemon, but you were playing with it from a distance, using it to explore the space. And we try to express a lot of its kind of behavior through the human robot interaction element, so through its motion. So the very first version, I think the unboxing experience, the robot just kind of turned on. The second version, it was a bit like Bambi, kind of like a baby. You had to find its feet, you had to put it down, and it would stagger, and that just completely transformed the experience. And I think this goes a long way in terms of as we as humans are designing robots to kind of be in the same space as us, we have to consider that what do we expect in terms of social norms. If we want these robots to really fit in a kind of no pun intended, organic kind of second nature type of way, then how they interact with us, how they move, how they look is really, really important. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think there's also a massive human insight that you had in the crossover between robots in a game and robots in real life, that I don't know, no one had at the time, as far as I remember. I mean, obviously you've got Nintendo and the RoboLab now that is a kit that you can use with Switch, but back then this was really
actually, I mean,
thing.
like just last night I was having a conversation with my girlfriend, because I just move, and I were talking about something. I just took stock of it, and even so, what we built was right at the intersection of robotics, gaming, bio inspiration, and as well as augmented reality as kind of as a interaction method. So, to me, looking back at that now, it was such a privilege and such an exciting space to be touching so many kind of elements of frontier technology. And that gave so much insight, which is informing kind of the work we're doing now in terms of interaction, usability, UI, and the direction that things are going to move into. And I think, to some extent, we're going to see more and more of that. Things that I think just last week, there's so many companies popping up this day, but a company that's going to be building a platform that has both a physical and a digital component. And as we, especially with lockdown, and we're spending a lot of our life in kind of the digital space, we're going to start to have more of that dual nature existence. And how does that fit in with the way we are entertained, the way we game? Those are going to be interesting questions that we ask ourselves for the foreseeable future.
That brings us on to the next question, which is a really nice segue. That Andrew Fletcher says, I love the widespread appeal and fun of Mechamon in particular. I wonder what future potential you see for the live art sector to work with robotics to create this type of engagement.
Madeline, I think you've actually, some of the motion work that you've done touches a lot on that.
Yeah, we're really galleries of experiential art museums. It's these immersive. Robotics, I think, has a key role to play in that, in rethinking how we experience space. That's my bias as an architect in general, especially at the time of social distancing. And this is really, a lot of what we're having now is just an acceleration of what was to happen in the future with, it's not responsible to travel all over the world all the time. Can we have a shared experience in two separate spaces through the use of robotics? And that's where I see robotics in the art world really doing hardcore research, what those opportunities are, and to start to help people figure out what directions we can go and explore in.
Because the robots can go where we can't.
Yeah, they can, and they can be many things, right? So a robot could be a wall that turns into a table, that turns into a bed. If we're thinking about how do we live the same way in a smaller space, a robot could also be one body space, right? Just like I could be playing a game where I am fencing Silas in a completely different part of the world, and we're playing together, and we have robots on either side, making that physical, tangible connection between us. There's just so much potential for new worlds of experiences that collapse space altogether, because these machines have mechanical bodies and mechanical minds.
I would echo that as well, actually. I mean, some of the work I've done outside of, Mechamon and Reach Robotics was a huge chunk of kind of my life so far. But, I've always been fascinated actually with the entertainment and the art side of it as a whole. And I think the opportunity that robotics and brings to that type of industry is to push the boundary of, what Madeline said, to push the boundary of what's possible. A project that comes to mind just before kind of my journey into the Mechamon world was this, where we had there was a quartet a plane, and I hooked up ECGs sensors, maybe not ECG, but we were measuring the activities, particularly around their heartbeat. And there was a 3D printed mechanical heart that could be held by the members of the audience to feel, you know, what to some extent as a proxy to feel what the performer was feeling. And then there was a pregnant lady, and you know, we attached it to her belly, and it was just something, you know, completely alien, you know, to be able to feel to have a different type of connection with this unborn child. So it's just, you know, to be able to push the frontier of entertainment. Another project before that I did with a rusty squid, they were building a winged suit, a winged robotic suit that would allow someone on stage to look completely different. And I just think there is so much in terms of, as we push the boundaries of what robotics is capable of and what robotics is, it unlocks application across so many different industries. Just in the same way, you've got better graphics, that changes the way you can game. You know, this is going to allow you, as Madeline said, to be able to play, you know, across boundaries, to be able to step into the virtual world and feel what it's like to be on another planet, you know, for example, all of these things.
But I think in order for that to happen, what different and diverse voices.
Absolutely.
Usability and making these tools, you know, giving people the agency and empowering them to say, well, I want this to reflect me. I want to do something that a company currently isn't offering me as an off-the-shelf product. So, and we saw this with mobile technology as well, right? The hardware sort of stabilized on board and focused on usability. Now all of a sudden it's an amazing product that we can relate to and have a meaningful use, not just a useful tool, but also use it in so many more meaningful and dynamic ways that were not imagined by the engineers that developed the tools.
Fantastic. I mean, and while we're touching on that, how could we make the pathways into the kinds of work you're doing easier and more open and wider for the people that don't get to do this kind of stuff?
Yeah, but that's a lot of the work that I try to do as well. You know, I went and I got a PhD, right? So including my architecture education, it was like 13 years at a university to sort of fumble around and that time to learn all these skills and to build the bridges between the two different silos of engineering and design. We're starting to see university programs pop up that build that bridge for you as these kind of domains become more and more intertwined. But I'm always inspired by and jealous that I'm not a little kid right now, right? And that I didn't have a Mechamon when I was growing up, right? Those things that help you feel like the technology of the future isn't happening to you, right? You're a part of it and a part of the decision-making process for how that future arrives. And so the work that I do tries to, we do work in consulting and with technology companies to develop tools that are useful, but at the same time engaging with policymakers and cultural institutions in taking this technology out of labs and out of corporate environments and into public spaces that people can have an awareness over what some of the potentials and complications are with these tools, and develop an informed opinion about and hopefully see and get their own family network excited about being a part of this cultural shift towards more technologically enhanced and augmented worlds.
Right.
Yeah, I think to add to some of that, when you look at this industry, especially frontier technology industry, robotics, artificial intelligence, on the one hand, it sometimes suffers from a lack of diversity. So on a personal level, I see a lot of the work that I do, first of all, in showing other people that there's a path there for you as well. So I try to, even as initially it might not appear like it. I don't particularly like the limelight. It's just a part of the, it's a necessary evil if you're a CEO. But a big part of the work that I do is particularly engaging young people from different backgrounds and underrepresented backgrounds to show them that, yes, you also have a path there. And then, second is, I think, as you were mentioning, Madeline, I think this doesn't just happen by accident. It takes a lot of consideration, looking at the socioeconomic factors and really making sure that policy, works to drive kind of inclusion so that the industry is more accessible. And ultimately that leads to, at what point do you start to expose people to this? Education is a big part of getting more people into this. So I think the more we can do in educating people and presenting options to them earlier on to show that you also can do this, and to show people that look like them doing this as well, will encourage them and enable people to go into these fields. And I think the beauty of robotics and what I love so much about artificial intelligence as a field as well is rather than what we had before, where technology was relatively static. We've got a table that doesn't quite move. We can build things that adapt to us and our unique needs. And so I think in the right hands with the right consideration, because it boils down to humanity and how we use the new powers that we have. But if we are considerate and caring, we have the tools in our hands to build a better world that will kind of serve all of us.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I mean, and it's certainly not certainly not a pipeline problem in terms of talented people who we want to bring into the conversation, into the mix, into the jobs and the development. It's much more of an access problem, and certainly from the Southwest Creative Technology Network perspective, we are looking at this as hard and as fast as we can and considering it deeply. And we take assistance from great folk in that as well. There's another question here. This is the safety question from Kate Entwistle. Madeline, in your video, watching you work and reprogram these robots, the robots have appeared almost like a pet, unwanted and redundant, in a shelter being rehomed, retrained and reloved by you. It's not bad. If a robot can look happy, you've achieved it. So what are your feelings on this? The large robots looked a little dangerous, and they are. I mean, sure they are. And to what degree do you consider safety?
Yeah, the real challenge with, taking 1-ton pile of metal and motors and turning open, and at the end of the day, it's a dangerous machine. It's a piece of manufacturing equipment. So it's almost a sleight of hand to reframe it into this curious machine that just wants to come check you out and see what you're all about. So safety is really paramount, right? Because it's on. I approach it from a lot of different levels, So the robotics company, they provided all of the hardware and safety equipment, but the safety standards for industrial robots are for factories and not museums, right? So there was a big gap underneath the safety panel that goes around the robot that a small child or a baby could crawl into, and that's like an incredibly dangerous situation. So I had to be the one of thinking about all of the possibilities that could happen. It was pretty nerve-wracking being a continent away and sort of remotely viewing, and I had like a cam for the robot as well. Safety is really something highly constrained context like a factory, and bring it into public spaces. You have to have layers of redundancy to protect the people around it and make sure that they have a really positive experience with these tools. But I do feel like that the efforts are worth it. I mean, we do the same thing as zoos, where the best zoo designs sort of make the cage between you and the animals disappear. And so that's in the design museum. That's really I sort of leaned into as kind of the design inspiration around what the experiential quality is with what that machine could be.
Great. Silas, how does safety turn up
I mean,
for you?
it's a really important aspect. As you know, at the last business, obviously, you know, safety from a interaction point of view, down to the things, you know, when you're designing a robot. We had a version where in the prototype version that we called McPinchy, because you could literally get your fingers stuck in the gearbox, and you know, and so we had to design that out of the product for what actually went to market. And then you've got industries that are, you know, well regulated, toy safety standards, making sure that you can't have something that's dangerous. But then also in the industrial automation space as well, you've literally got robots that could break a person. So that starts to become even more important. And so part of the technology that we're building now help to bring accountability and auditing capabilities when you start to adopt these types of technology. So it's a key part of robot design and robot building, is what I'd add on to what Madeline said.
Yeah, I think there's also an element of transparency, right?
Brilliant.
When you're designing the physical systems to be transparent in how they're operating, a lot of things that go wrong is because a robot is doing one thing when robot thinks the robot is off when it's actually on. And when you think about, you know, the physical systems around that, or the data systems around that, to sort of bring a level of transparency to how these really complicated black box systems work.
One cheeky last question, because I know we've run out of time. This is from George Oates, who says, how do you think we should design for robots relating to each other? Silas, can I
for
give
robots
that to you
relating
first?
to each other? I mean, that is also a very large question. I'll go back to something Madeline said before around kind of the world is also on the verge, or we're starting to realize more that, you know, resources are finite, and if we don't take care of this planet, we need to build technology in a more sustainable way. So in everything that we can do when it comes to robots being symbiotic, being able to support each other so that, you know, the total energy kind of consumption is reduced and done efficiently as much as possible is really, really important. So I think that's one consideration that should be done as we're building robotic systems that interact with each other. And then second is, I think, you know, everyone says this, but we are, when it comes to robot intelligence, but we're going to look back and see the path we took to get to highly intelligent robots. And I think as a creator, you know, when you build a robot and you imbue it with intelligence, it's hard not to anthropomorphize, to put kind of human characters on them. So, do it with kindness and do it with the thoughts that this is supposed to live in the same space as humanity. So just build with kindness.
Beautiful. Madeline, have you got any last words?
I think that we
around
can
that
look to nature and how different species in nature relate to, begin to build modes of engagement and interaction for how these robotic systems can help each other survive without us getting mixed up in it.
Brilliant. I could carry on all evening talking to you and hearing about the way you were approaching this work. I hope one day you two work together, because that would be amazing. And at the very least, that you could embed some principles for the rest of the kind of robotics development, because I must say I feel very much at ease with the idea of a future with robotics and automation in it, with you two building in the right qualities. Thank you so much, Madeline Gannon, Silas Adekunle. Rosanna,
thank you, everyone. Thank you for the
thoughtful question.
question.
To you.
Hi.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jill. Thank you so much, Jill. Yes, and Madeline and Silas, really rich discussion there about robotics and society, and I think the values that underpin both of your work. And that brings us to the end of the automation showcase. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I've really enjoyed hosting it. And can you believe that we've had a total of 28 live sessions across the day? So a huge congratulations to all our contributors. It's been really wonderful to hear about your research, your ideas and visions for the future. And a big congratulations also to the teams who've pulled all of the speakers and the tech together for today. Big thanks from me to Charlie and Andy from Collider in particular, who've been guiding me through this online hosting business. And hopefully you guys at home have found the things that you've been involved in thought-provoking and inspiring. Maybe you've even made some new friends or collaborators in the networking area. There's going to be recordings of all of today's content, and that will be available on the Southwest Creative Technology Network website over the coming weeks. And if you do want to hear more about the future of the programme, you can sign up to the mailing list and become a network member. There is still lots to come for Swicton as we continue to navigate our changing futures. And well, I guess a network is only as good as its members. So please tell your friends, connect with each other and continue to share with us how you're thinking about and how you actually are creating more inclusive, sustainable, creative industries and futures. So thanks again from everyone at the Southwest Creative Technology Network for joining us today, and we hope that you have a lovely weekend.